Hi everyone, it's Nicole for Honeybee Stamps, and today I am sharing a one-layer trifold card with you featuring the Piece of Cake and Mae the Mouse stamp sets from the recent Brie Mine release. I love all the cupcakes and sweets and treats and things from especially Piece of Cake, but also I think there's some great images from Mae the Mouse, and so I am using those to make my sweets themed scene card. First, I trimmed down a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock to 5.5 inches by 12 inches. The paper is the panels will actually be just a little bit narrower than a standard card, so I like to mark them with a pencil at 4 inches and then again at 8 inches. And that gives me a guide for where my card is going to bend to make the trifold. But I like to wait to do that trifold till last so that the ink doesn't pool up around the seams of the card. I also like to kind of start with my main panel and play around with my images, play around with my sentiment, because I tend to like to have something on that first panel for when the recipient pulls it out of the envelope, they see some sort of greeting, and then when they open it up, the rest of the scene and the sentiment is revealed. I also really like to make these one layer. There's nothing that you have to try to bend or try to, get a crease in die cuts or anything like that if you make everything one layer. So there's lots of masking. And my other big tip, I love coloring with Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. They're water-based, they're not going to leak through the cardstock, so what you see on the back, the nice, smooth, beautiful white backing on the card, there's not going to be any bleed through like you would with an alcohol ink marker. So those are kind of my tips for my favorite ways to create a one-layer trifold card. Even though this is a ton of masking, and it's a lot of masking, it's worth it. And mostly, the most time-consuming part of this card is actually coloring. Another little idea, if you're sending this to maybe a child or any card like this to a child, go ahead and stamp it all up and leave them a little note telling them to color it in. Wouldn't even have to color it. It's almost like a, color me type of project, a gift and a card all in one. I always loved those little color things, cards that you would get in the mail as a kid that would do something, extra. It wasn't just a gift card. So I'm going to lay out my images. This serves two purposes. It gives me an idea of what all is going to fit within each 4-inch wide panel, and it's going to show me what's going to be in the forefront of the card because that needs to be stamped first. Whatever is up front needs to be stamped first, and you build on that. I would suggest taking a photo of your project or your stamps laid out in case you forget or get derailed while you're working on it so you can come back to it easily. I stamped the little truffle and the tag and the string. Then I masked those. I stamped the chocolate covered strawberry. In fact, the truffle and the strawberry are from the Mae the Mouse stamp set. Let me see if anything else on this. Oh, the Hershey's Kisses. Those are also from Mae the Mouse. And I believe everything else is from Piece of Cake. So you can see that they really work together. I really wanted this to be full of sweets, almost like it's a table display of cupcakes and cake and sweets and chocolate-covered strawberries and all that good stuff. Oh, the chocolate-covered strawberry. Did I mention? I think maybe I did mention. It's from Mae the Mouse. So we've got those two there. And then we're just going to build off of that. So we've got a cupcake, and we'll do the paper liner of the cupcake and the cupcake top, mask those off. If you want to decorate the top of the cupcake, now is the time to do that. I like to do some of the cherries. If you wanted this to be maybe more of a birthday themed card, this could be a birthday themed card. It also could be Valentine's, it could be a friendship card, it could be an anytime kind of card, which was what I was going for. But if you wanted this to be more birthday themed, consider changing up that greeting on the gift tag. I put I love you, but you could do the happy birthday sentiment. You could do the birthday candles. There's also, so maybe you want this to be more of a wedding shower, bridal shower, wedding card, any of those kind of things. There's also a beautiful rose and like some leaves, so you could decorate your cake and things with those kinds of images instead. It's really versatile. There's a lot more that you can do with this than maybe you think of right off the bat. So I'm going to do the cherry. Mask just the cherry part. You don't have to worry about the stem. In fact, this is the smallest mask on this image. I'm not a super huge fan of masking when I have to fussy cut a bunch of teeny tiny images, and that's one of the great things about honeybee stamps is these are substantial images. In fact, so many of their images really lend themselves to creating larger canvases as far as cards, whether it be 5x7 cards or a trifold card like today, or images that go from the front of the card to the inside of the card, whatever that might be, or just images that are nice in size and really easy to color. Or if you like to fussy cut, you can fussy cut them very easily, I think, which I really enjoy. I created most of my masks only once. I think maybe only the small strawberry that I'm putting on the cake stand on this first panel did I need a mask twice for it. And that's just because I needed to mask or stamp it twice, mask them both, and then stamp the piece of cake, which you'll see here in a minute. So we've got our cupcake, and now it's the cake stand time. So cake stand, strawberries, and cake slice. This is really going to round out our first panel of our card. But I can then take my cake stand mask and move that and use it again and again. I can use my cupcake mask again. There's also, it's probably important to note, there are two options for a cupcake topper. There's more of the cupcake with a glaze, which is what I've already stamped. And then there's the cupcake that looks like it has the frosting piped on top of it, which I'm going to do for two of the other cupcakes. And I'm going to even add a little glitter to them to look like they're sugared. So here is the two strawberries that needed masked before I stamp the cake slice. And the cake slice is what I was talking about if you wanted to decorate the cake plate or the cake with the rosette and the leaves. This would be beautiful for a bridal shower, I think. Just as I mentioned, a great versatile stamp set. Another little tip, I am using VersaFine ONYX black ink. This is a pigment ink. It's a little tricky because it stays wet, and so you've got to keep your hands out of it, or you need to heat set it or set it with a clear embossing powder so that you don't smear it. Another little idea is I'm using some tweezers to pick my masks up and move them off so I don't have to worry about that as much. I'm also speeding up the video because this is, as I mentioned, a lot of masking. We're going to move on to the second panel, which is again going to feature another cupcake. In fact, this one's going to feature two cupcakes. Each panel features the cupcake stand. I like to do my embellishments usually in odd numbers, and I decided to keep my cupcake stands consistent. I could have colored them all different colors, but I went with a teal color, almost like an aqua or teal glass cake stand, kind of like that milk glass type look, sort of. And then I did, I think, 4 cupcakes and 2 pieces of cake, just whatever looked the best. But the cake stands are the odd number of things, but they're spaced evenly amongst the 3 panels, and I think that just helps visually move your eye along the design and the scene. So the second panel, cake stand, but this time on the cake stand, to give it more height, because the cupcake is taller than the cake slice pretty much, and it kind of just depends on where you place it as well. We're going to put a cupcake on that cake stand and put a cherry on top, and then our cupcake down on the ground or on top of the table has the frosting top. A cherry on top of this one as well. But then we've got a Hershey Kiss, we've got another little truffle. Those little images rounded out. We're going to put a chocolate covered strawberry on this cake stand next to the cupcake instead of just a plain strawberry. You could do whatever you want here, but I think these little kind of accessory images really round it out nicely and just tie into the overall sweetness of the design. And then the little Hershey Kiss-like looking image, which I absolutely love. I think it's darling. Really lends itself to making this kind of an I love you Valentine's-y themed card. Moving to that third panel. This is also going to have a cupcake, but we're going to space it a little differently. It's almost like those three cupcake images in the center are going to be squished up a little bit, and then there's going to be a little break, but there's going to be two Hershey Kisses right here. And then the last cake stand will be hanging off the edge of the card, and it'll have a little truffle behind it. So again, I like to lay out the images, see what needs to be on the forefront, see if I can stamp more than one thing at a time, and then just go ahead and stamp those. In this case, we need to do a Hershey Kiss that's going to be out in the front, and probably the cake stand. And I fiddle with it quite a bit. I've also got all my masks over here to the side so that I can reuse them as I work along. I've also decided not to put anything on top of this cupcake. We're going to leave it without anything on top, no cherry on top, which I've done with the other ones. I generally like to mix it up when I'm doing this many different images. And don't be afraid to double check as many times as you need to before you stamp things. I always think it's better to take your time with this step so that you get everything just right. Just a couple more images and then we can move on to coloring, to adding our greetings, and all those little finishing touches and things. With my trifold cards, I generally try to keep the embellishing to a minimum. And that's just because the card folds in on itself, and when you send it through the mail, if you put anything dimensional on it, it could cause creases or indents or just kind of ruin the overall look of the card. So I tend to make sure any embellishing I do is flat. That can be pin work, that a little bit of glitter here today, a little glossy accents, not a ton. I'm probably not going to do Nouveau Crystal Drops. I would do Nouveau Crystal Drops in White Blizzard if I wanted some sparkle. I'm also going to draw a line with my ruler here to ground my images. So kind of pretending that this is a tabletop. There is what our scene looks like. Isn't that fun? So this is where I was talking, if you wanted to, this is the point you add your stamped sentiments, score your card, send it in the mail, and let the recipient color it in if they want to. I think that would be a really fun way to give a child a fun card in the mail. I'm going to split my sentiment. I played around with the placement a whole bunch, trying to make it work the best. I mentioned this quite a bit, but one of my favorite things about honeybee stamps is the fact that you can mix and match the greetings to really say what you want to say. So the bottom part of my greeting is "and a piece of cake." And the first part of my greeting, which we'll stamp here in a second, on the first panel, all you need is, second panel will say love in red, and then the bottom and a piece of cake. So all you need is love and a piece of cake. I think that's so cute, so clever, but not the only sentiment you could make with this stamp set. So again, very versatile. I do like to switch it up, and the word love is larger than any of the other words in the sentiment, so I thought I would stamp it in a different color to draw your attention to it. Also, because I divided my sentiment, I'm going to take a black pen and do a little dot, dot, dot in front of the word and after the word love. Before I start coloring, very carefully going to take an eraser and erase my pencil lines. I'm using a paintbrush to get rid of any of those eraser flakes. I do not want to use my finger. I do not want to rub across the ink, just in case any of that ink is still wet. I do not want to smear all of that hard work that I've already done. Now comes the magical part, you guys, and that is the coloring. So much fun. I am going to speed through this pretty quickly because it is a lot of coloring. However, I have left it in for those of you who really love this part. I tried to keep my color combinations to, I hate to say a minimum because there are quite a few colors, but anywhere you see dark chocolate, I'm using the same color combination. I think it's deep brown, mid brown, and beige. The pink is always peach pink and sugared almond pink. If I want it to be a little lighter, sugared almond pink and pink haze. The cake stands, turquoise green and green shadow, one of my favorite color combinations. The cake itself, so the cupcake or the cake on the cake stand, that's going to be a very teeny tiny bit of mid brown, beige, and light beige. And then the cupcake wrappers, this is where we can, or the truffle wrappers as well, this is where we can add pops of color so that we don't have too many neutrals. So our first cupcake wrapper is pink and purple with a red cherry. The cake was one of my favorites to color. I'm not sure why, but I really think that this color combination is successful. And then I made it look like chocolate frosting with the deep brown and mid brown. And even a little beige here and there because I think that just blends it beautifully. You can always add a little bit more deep color if you need to. Red and light carmine for strawberries and cherries. Light green and pale green for the tops of our strawberries. I did switch up the color combination for green if I use the green for truffle wrappers or cupcake wrappers, and that's green and yellow green. So a little bit more limey color than what we're using for the tops of the strawberries. And then I want to help ground my images. So that little tabletop there, we're using light blue and then our blender pen to blend that out. I don't really want to color in the entire background. I just want to give it a tiny hint of color. I did not do this on the upper part of the card, but if you wanted to, you could definitely do that in another color. And I think that would be really fun as well. Or even a big wide stripe. I think that would be kind of cool up at the top of the card. The cupcake top for this cupcake, I wanted it to be a little softer than the cupcake wrapper. So it's sugared almond pink, pink haze, and the blender. Now I'm using my scrap piece of paper that I'm using to clean the tips of my markers to keep my hand off of what I've already colored. Just in case I don't want anything to smear, so I'm protecting my paper by using this little scrap piece of paper here while I am coloring. Add in a little bit more of that light blue and take the blender to blend that out. It just adds a tiny hint of color. Not a lot, but a nice little bit. It's really starting to come together. We're about halfway done now. And I kind of got to that point where I thought, well, anything that's going to be red, let's color in red. And then I decided to do the Hershey Kiss wrapper and reds and pinks. A little bit to go with a more Valentine's love themed feel. Went in with my browns to do the chocolate glaze on the cupcake, the chocolate covered strawberry, and the truffle. That beige just adds such a great little highlight area to that, anything with those other two colors. I love how that looks. Some greens, light green, pale green. Cupcake wrapper here, we're going to do yellow, and I pulled in some blue. I felt like I needed the addition of some other color, and in this case I decided to do blue and light blue. But blue tends to really pull out, so I hardly add any of that to the cupcake wrapper, and I pulled it out with light blue, and I love that color. The gift tag, I did a little red, light carmine, and blender, so it has a nice little red pop over there. The top of this yellow cupcake, yellow and pale yellow. We're really about to that final panel now. I decided to be consistent with my Hershey Kisses. So they're all red and pink. As much as I like to switch it up, every once in a while I think that a little bit of consistency throughout helps tie it together as well. I tried to do different wrappers. I think I got 2 pink and purple ones. I really liked that color, and I felt like I needed some more pink, I think, over here, so I went ahead and went with that. The cake's going to be colored exactly the same. So mid brown, dark brown, beige. For the cake itself, beige, light beige, a little mid brown. I just love watching these scenes come together. It's so satisfying and so much fun. Trifold cards are one of my very favorite cards for this reason. It makes all that masking worth it. And then, of course, as I mentioned, finishing off my cake stand with the turquoise green and green shadow, keeping that consistent all the way through the design. We just have a couple little things to finish with some truffles, truffle wrappers, that last Hershey's Kiss, and then the customizing part comes in, which for this piece of cake stamp set, I love this. You can customize the little tag coming out of the Hershey Kisses with several different sayings. We're going to use XOXO, kisses, and hugs. And we're going to stamp I love you, which there's several different sentiments you can use for the gift tag, but we're going to use I love you, stamp it with clear embossing ink, emboss with white embossing powder so it stands out on that tag, and then we're going to color in the heart with our red marker, which just makes that pop even more. And look at that little heart come to life. I love how that turned out. So much fun. And then instead of using any embossing powder or even black ink, we're going to use red ink to customize the Hershey's tags. So there's the XOXO. And then we'll just simply move this on down and we will add our other ones. And I'm going to play with that a little bit. I think I'm going to even have to grab a mask for that cake stand just to make sure, because the tag is kind of back behind it, or is supposed to appear to be back behind it. And I want to stamp these at the same time. Using a MISTI allows you to stamp it more than once if you don't get a good stamped impression the first time. And there is our card. So let's add just a couple of things to dress it up. Let everything dry because I'll have some liquid product on here. We're going to take glossy accents and just draw a really thin line of glue on the pink frosted cupcake and the yellow frosted cupcake and sprinkle on a little Prisma glitter so that they look like they're sugared. I'm using a coffee filter to gather up any of that extra glitter. And then I'm going to use glossy accents on the 3 cherries. And that's really it. I decided that was probably plenty. As I mentioned, I don't like to use a lot of dimensional embellishment because I want to maintain the integrity of the design. I'm using a dry paintbrush to remove any flakes that maybe aren't where they're supposed to be, that migrated. Once my card is completely dry, so I probably let this dry for a good hour or so, I'm going to come back and take a Scor-Pal and I am going to score this at 4 inches and 8 inches, and that will finish the card. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this 1-layer card design featuring honeybee stamps and dies. The supplies I used to create my card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring honeybee stamps and dies that you might be interested in. Thanks for joining me, and we'll catch you next time.